Welcome to the IDPro Show, your favorite channel for hearing about how to grow your career in digital identity. I'm Heather Flanagan, Executive Director of IDPro and Principal Editor for the IDPro Body of Knowledge.
I'm Chris Cochran from AKA Identity. And Heather and I, we go on this incredible journey to find the best and brightest in identity to bring you the best tips, tricks, and career advice.
So we're here today to chat with Anna Kmieciak. Anna's been working in identity and access management at Indigo Consulting Canada as a consultant and a software development for a couple of years. She's currently working with a bank. And before all that, she was a teacher, which I take to mean a person with an epic amount of patience and creativity.
Yeah.
She is passionate about advancing IAM and just identity technology and its mission. And welcome, Anna.
Thank you.
So, rumor has it that you taught preschool before diving into tech. And I'm not going to dwell upon the similarities between preschoolers and some of the tech people I've worked with. Can you share how you got from there to working in tech?
Yeah, so I've always had a passion for technology, so I decided to pursue that. And the first time I worked with IAM, even though I wasn't aware that it was IAM at that time, was when it was by chance when I had to do a personal project. And I heard that this was over 5 years ago, that there's a lot of OAuth misconfigurations that were causing security issues. So I thought that I would try to implement OAuth. And it was not very beginner friendly. So I couldn't find a way to implement it first. So I found Keycloak, which is an open source IAM tool, and I got very overwhelmed by all of the keywords and all the concepts associated with that and everything. And so then I finished school and I worked in data for a while, for around a year, and I thought that's where I would work in. But then I got the opportunity to work in IAM, and I was reminded of kind of the project that I had and how interesting it was. So I decided to go back to working in IAM. So that's how I got here.
And so, where was the transition point from being a teacher?
Yeah, so I did really enjoy teaching, and I enjoyed the technology aspect of it. I would always try to incorporate that into. I was a preschool teacher, so I would try to incorporate sort of that into the curriculum.
Hmm.
And I think that carried over a lot of things. Like, for example, one thing that I noticed is when we were teaching, we would do small presentations. And they were all kind of built around the fact that preschool age children can focus at most 2 to 5 minutes,
Right.
usually around 2 minutes. And you can be presenting the most interesting thing in the world. But at that mark, they lose focus and they're not really paying attention. And you can extend that by using visual aid or using some kind of interactive engagements.
Hmm.
And adults have it's a bit longer attention span. But I think, and I think it's unrealistic to do this all the time. But I think maintaining attention and keeping people engaged when presenting difficult concepts is really crucial to get ideas or call to actions across. So I think that is something that really transferred well because in this field it's interesting and there's a lot of interesting solutions for people.
Yeah. But it's not even just that. I have three daughters with
Mhm.
three very different personalities. And so, even if you're speaking to a certain demographic, there are still different personalities and interests. So, was there anything else that transferred over in by means of communication from your preschool training and experience to identity?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think you have to kind of the field is very dynamic in both of those cases, even though it's also very different. But you always have to be prepared or have to deal with different situations calmly. I think that is something that's also went over really well, and you have to recognize that there's different kinds of people that you have to work with in different kinds of positions. So you have to explain things well and get the understanding across.
Very cool. I don't have children myself, and when I see them, I tend to run away, which they think is a lot of fun because then they start chasing me. I don't quite understand how all of that works. But that said, it couldn't have been easy to get started to make that jump. What was the biggest initial hurdle to working in identity, and how did that actually shape your approach to the whole field?
Yeah, so I think the first challenge is understanding what IAM is. I think there's different protocol acronyms, standard acronyms, software acronyms, and business acronyms.
Hmm.
So I feel like that was challenging. And there's also, it's very context specific and there's different roles, kind of like the meaning changes a bit, relative to what you're talking about. And I think the second difficulty was to find information on IAM products. Like the knowledge felt that it was locked in the minds of experts. And I think it's much better now than it was even 2 years ago. and having a great community definitely helps with that.
Hmm.
And I think even with things changing so quickly, it can be hard, especially for newcomers, to kind of know where to go and where to look for these new things.
Speaking to that, the whole thing about acronyms, if someone was coming in today, what are some of the tips or tricks or advice that you would give to someone that is trying to come in and really immerse themselves in the identity space, but there's just so many acronyms to keep up with? What piece of advice would you have for those folks?
Yeah, first I would kind of not look at the acronyms as the first thing, because that could be very overwhelming. I think the challenge is that there's many fields where there's a specific path for specific jobs and identity. It seems like people kind of fall in and stay because the business needs are so great that everything kind of grows from there. So I think it's really helpful to listen to the stories and paths of others, because I think there's really a path for everyone. There's a ton of different ways people got into the field. Um, and then I wanted to give two pieces of advice that I heard on this show before. The first is, I think Ian Glazer said not to focus on the acronyms and to focus on the product,
Mhm.
or like any product that you can learn. I think this is really good advice, because when you focus on a product, it kind of narrows it down, and that's the mistake that I made when I tried to implement OAuth the first time. I tried to kind of understand everything very broadly, whereas when I focused more on the product, as I do now, or when I started, um, it kind of narrows down what you have to learn. And sometimes there's certification paths, so it kind of structures the learning and it makes it much easier. And I think Bailey Bersick said to learn the basics and then build on that. And I think that's really great advice, because there's also a lot of podcasts that are out there, and it can be difficult to follow the conversations if you don't really understand the terms. And it's not like they can redefine the terms every single episode.
Mhm.
So I think once you get the basics, you can kind of understand a lot more. And then with repetition, it really starts to click and build on itself. So I think it just takes time. And I think for the terms, also the IDPro body of knowledge is a great place.
Aw, I feel love. Okay, blatant plug for IDPro. Let's talk a little bit about how that body of knowledge and the whole community has helped in your professional development. Have there been any particular memorable experiences or other insights from like our Slack channel or from Identiverse?
Yeah, so I think IDPro is a really great place for the compilation and centralization of terms, because I think when I was trying to learn what IAM is, I first went, I looked up authorization authentication, and I found OAuth and SAML, and after I kind of didn't know where to go next. So with the body of knowledge, it's like there's a lot of terms and a lot of basics, but also the new ideas are there as well. So I found this very helpful, and also the videos that go with some of the articles. Sometimes I would watch the videos, and it kind of it really helped my learning a lot. And also IDPro being at Identiverse was great, because it seemed like at the IDPro events there's a lot of experts that are really passionate about the ideas. So it was really great to have the conversations that I've had there.
I want to say a little bit more about, writing for the body of knowledge because it's so um empowering to hear that people are actually reading it and they're finding it useful and really cool. It's actually very hard to find people willing to write for it because they're like, wait, I don't know that I can be the expert,
Mhm.
or I don't know, that sounds way too formal, or where do I start or anything. So I've actually been given the go ahead that I can actually write a couple articles for the body of knowledge, and I choose this stuff that I don't know much about
That's the
because
way to
that
do it.
it gives me an opportunity to learn. So, like right now, I am struggling with an article about tokens,
Yeah.
OAuth tokens. What's a token? And I thought I was being clever because I went to the OAuth specs to say, okay, let's look at tokens. And man, it's like mind blown because you've got refresh tokens and access tokens and bounded tokens and client tokens. And really, it's like a grab bag of how they're using the word token.
Yeah.
And it's proving to be really, really challenging to write. And I've had some fantastic reviewers help me out with it, but they're coming with their own interpretation because one of them was one of the spec writers for an OAuth, one of the many, many, many OAuth RFCs. And he's like, well, actually, you think of tokens this way. And then someone who isn't a spec writer, but he's a great name in the community and sees this stuff implemented. He looked at it and he's like, wait, but I think of tokens this completely different way, from a different lens, from a different layer.
Mhm.
Putting everything together to get an article for the body of knowledge is a great way to learn and not always as simple as I would like it to be.
I gotta ask you. I heard that you had a fork in the road and you could either go security or AI, and you chose security. Is that how it went down? And is there a story around that?
Well, I've always had an interest in security, and I think the field is growing in relevance, especially as everything becomes digitized. And the more I've been learning about identity and IAM issues, the more I don't know if I just pay more attention to it or if it's always been there. But even in more general security podcasts, I feel like there's identity issues or consequences related to bad, you know, identity implementation or management. So I feel like there's a lot of things that are not defined yet, and so it's really a great opportunity to be able to contribute to that. And but that being said, I still see AI being implemented in products I work with, especially as recommendation engines. For example, if someone has to make a lot of decisions related to access, AI can suggest which decisions
Hmm.
they should make to kind of help with the, if someone has to make 100 decisions in a row, it kind of helps them through that, I think.
So what's been the most rewarding aspect of this for you?
I think definitely the people. I work with a lot of great and very smart people, and the community in general is really great. Even the Slack channel, I always see very interesting conversations happening there. And I think the problems that we're working on are very important, and they're not solved yet. And we get to work with really interesting technology as well.
Oh, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. One of the points you're making about as you're listening to security podcast, everything, still comes back to identity, but it means that people are already working in the field of identity. They don't even know it.
Hmm.
For those people, though, that are starting to twig to the fact that identity is a really big thing and they might want to go ahead and build a career on it, what advice would you have for them?
I would say try to get involved in the community as much as you can, because I think, it can feel kind of difficult and isolating because it's still a very niche field.
Mm.
Even though it seems to be growing in importance, it feels still kind of niche sometimes. So if you can, especially IDPro is a great community for that kind of thing. And also, yeah, getting the basics down. And I think maybe even recognizing that, in the security podcast, there's a lot of things that are related to identity. But I think maybe, like I heard in a previous episode, Heather, that you said that there's AI and security, and identity is not really, doesn't seem to be as highlighted as those two. But I think it definitely really exists in those spaces, but maybe it's just not categorized as such.
Mhm.
So I think, yeah, just learning as much as possible and trying to implement a product, definitely.
Yeah, I think maybe part of it is the difference between thinking of something as, is it an IAM problem or is it an identity problem? There's an overlap between those things,
Hmm.
definitely, but like a lot of the people that are in the AI space, they're talking about personhood and how do you identify a thing as, is this a person or is this a bot? They don't think of it as an IAM challenge. They just think of how do I capture the identity of what this thing is. For me, I can't separate that out because the why do you care? It's usually you care because it's like, well, do I it feeds what you do with it, right? I want to know who or what this is because that's going to gateway whether they can access my material,
Right.
whether they are authorized to do it or whether I'm trying to protect my intellectual property from being in training data or, any number of different things. Uh, and yet the industry isn't quite made that bridge into, no, really, you're talking about an identity and access management problem. Another industry that is really a lot about identity and IAM, but doesn't think of itself that way, possibly because it's, just a little bit regulated, would be banking. And you're working at a bank. I don't want to hear anything specific about the banks I don't even want to know which bank you're working with, but I do want to talk about compliance challenges. So you're in Canada, and I think the Quebec's Law 25 on identity management is a really interesting indicator of what countries might do in terms of regulation as it comes towards IAM. So what think about that? How does that shape what you do every day dealing with regulations like that?
Yeah, so the Law 25 is kind of similar to GDPR in Europe and CCPA in California, that protects the privacy of individuals by regulating use and disclosure of personal information. And it's implemented, I think, in 3 steps from 2022 to 2024. So we're in the last step now. And so we use IAM tools to help with this. And on a day-to-day basis, the business side understands the requirements, and the architects kind of understand the products and tools that we use inside and out. And then they scope out solutions that then us as developers and architects, as developers and consultants, we can work on and use. So in a sense, we don't really have to understand the details of the law to do our work. So we deal much more with the kind of the coding side of those things. So that's also why, if you want to get started in this, understanding the product can be more helpful than trying to understand how everything kind of fits together, because that's usually what we're working with. So yeah, so we help develop those, and we work sometimes with auditors, and it's mostly about making sure that the you can't just collect data for no reason. There has to be a very real reason, and then you have to be able to verify why, um, if you actually need it, and then there has to be a plan for the life cycle of that data, and you have to be able to kind of follow and prove that only the people that really should have the access do.
Mhm.
So those are the kind of solutions that we help implement.
Yeah, I think, programs like that really help move things forward and really puts things. I mean, we know technology.
Mhm.
Technology, when something new comes around, it's like the wild, wild west, and we have to create order to bring things forward a little bit. I want to talk a little bit because I know you've done a lot of low level work in identity, and for people that are uninitiated, it might be like, oh, low level means easy. No, not that is quite the opposite. So you have a technical depth that most people really don't get a chance to get to. And I'm sure that colors and gives additional context to privacy, encryption, and session management. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So even usually the architects that kind of do implement the higher level stuff, they usually started implementing the lower level stuff for what we work on, because without that, it's kind of difficult to get to that level. Because a lot of times, I know it's happened to me where I think I understand something that I've read about, but I haven't implemented, and then when it comes time to do it, I realize, okay, I really don't understand this at all. So I think really the depth that you do by doing it is unmatched, and you always come up to edge cases or things that you would never have thought of. So I think that side of it is really important. It gives a lot more depth, even though it doesn't really help explain how everything fits together. But it's equally as important, I think, as well.
And then we got to talk about the future. Since you're really on the front lines of identity right
Mhm.
now, what do you see going into the future? Do you see any innovations or changes or trends that are going to really shape the way identity operates?
In terms of banking, I think open banking is really interesting. I know it's not in Canada yet, but it's in Australia and in the UK, I believe. So I think that would be something that I would like to see going forward. As for trends, I think the IM industry will definitely grow, and I think the solutions will become easier and cheaper to implement as time goes on. And also personally, I'm really interested in verifiable credentials. I just really like the idea that you don't have to authenticate yourself. You don't have to give all of your personal information away. You just have to, prove that you're you, and that's it. But I know I followed your discussion about that on the Slack channel, Heather, where you made a good point. You said that there's not enough use cases to maybe justify the infrastructure
Mhm.
necessary for that, and that's also a good point. But that's something that I'm interested in.
I want to say for the
Yeah.
folks listening, the point I was making there was very much the verifiable credentials at first glance have a lot of value to the individual, which is great. We love that. We love to improve their experience. And yet, that's actually sort of a necessary but not sufficient aspect to why would an enterprise change their IAM infrastructure to support this new thing? What other than user satisfaction would they get out of it to actually make it just a financially viable decision, given what they have today, presumably mostly kind of works. So I agree. I think the verifiable credential stuff is very interesting, but I'm not convinced that we've found the how to make the ROI worth it.
Yeah, I agree, because I think it appeals to people. Like, people don't want to give their personal information away, but I think if, even if it's just to buy alcohol at the gas station without having to give all your information, I don't know if that would justify the cost of
Hmm.
implementing the whole infrastructure for that. But
Yeah.
yeah.
If you had to say one thing, one piece of advice or word of encouragement or inspiration to the folks looking to get into identity, what would that one thing be?
I would say it's really worth it because there's a lot of interesting problems and interesting people in this field, and really it's just, I think if you put in the effort, you're getting a lot further than you think you are. Because I know about 1 year in, I thought, that I was doing a good job, but I really didn't see myself improving until I had to explain everything that I learned to someone, and I realized, okay, I actually did learn a lot. Um, yeah, so I would just say as long as you put in that effort, like you're probably, you're better than most people.
Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to hop on the mics with us. Thank you to everyone out there that's listening or watching us wherever you are. And a special thank you to IDPro and AK Identity for allowing Heather and I to go on this journey. And if you're not an IDPro member, be sure to check it out, whether your company becomes a member or you become an individual member. We'd love to have you, and we'd love to see you in the Slack. And with that, we will see everyone next time.